He was half my age, yet he saw the woman I had forgotten how to be. I never believed I would fall in love again. At 65, you stop expecting life to offer you new chapters. You start to believe that the book has been written. Joy, heartbreak, laughter, loss, and the rest is just for quiet acceptance. That was me. Eleanor Vance, retired literature professor, a widow for nearly a decade, and a woman who spoke more to her garden than to the people on her street. Before I unfold the rest of this night, take a second to hit like and subscribe. It really does help more than you know, and if you're drawn into stories like this, I want you here for every one of them. Also tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Are you in a small town where the evenings fall slow and gentle, or in a city where the lights never quite go dark? My house sat at the end of Havenwood Lane, where ancient oak trees draped their branches over fences like old friends sharing secrets. For years, that quiet street had been my sanctuary, my shield from the noise of the world and from the ache that came with remembering my husband, Arthur. Every morning was a ritual. Coffee, the soft murmur of the local public radio station, the sound of wind stirring the curtains. My daughter called once a week from the city, her voice always rushed. "Mom, you should get out more," she'd say. "Join a book club or something." I would promise I would, knowing I never would. The truth was I didn't want new people. New faces meant new questions, and I was comfortable inside my small world until the day he moved in next door. Leo Hayes was 28, a name I didn't know, but a voice that carried over the fence when he laughed, a sound that felt like sunlight after a long winter. His father, Martin, had been my neighbor for 15 years, a quiet man whose life was as measured as my own. But one summer afternoon, a rental truck arrived, its bed piled high with boxes, a guitar case, and a large, slightly broken floor lamp that made me smile. That was my first glimpse of him. Tall, with hair the color of pale wheat, and a restless energy that seemed too big for our sleepy town. He waved when he caught me watching from my window, and I remember blushing like I was a girl again. Over the next few weeks, I saw him everywhere, on the driveway, on the porch, in the yard. He was always fixing something for his father or strumming his guitar on the steps as the sun set. Sometimes he'd hum a melody I almost recognized. One morning, as I was deadheading my roses, he called over the fence. "Hey, Mrs. Vance, those roses are incredible. Do they have secrets you're willing to share?" I laughed. I could, but I doubt you'd have the patience. These roses are as stubborn as people. He smiled, leaning against the fence. Then I guess I'll learn patience. That was how it began. An innocent conversation about flowers that turned into something much deeper. Leo started visiting often under the pretense of borrowing tools or asking for advice on cooking, or writing, or just about anything. But soon, it wasn't an excuse anymore. He came to talk, to listen, to sit quietly with me when the evening light made everything look like a painting. I learned that he had left his job as a journalist in the city after a devastating breakup and had come back to help his father recover from a fall. He missed the noise of the city, the chaos of his old life. But he said, "The quiet feels good for now." He spoke with a kind of honesty that felt rare, as if he hadn't yet learned how to build the walls most of us hide behind. And when he looked at me, he truly looked, his gaze steady, without pity or judgment. One night, a storm knocked out the power in the whole neighborhood. The house was dark, save for the flicker of candles. I was sitting by the window when I heard a knock at the door. It was Leo, drenched from the rain, holding 2 mugs of hot spiced cider. "Thought you might need company," he said. We sat by the fireplace, the wind howling outside. He told me stories from his travels, the time he got lost in a foreign city, the street artist who taught him a chord progression he still couldn't forget. I listened, laughing more than I had in years, and then, for the first time in so long, I felt something stir inside me, a warmth I had buried after Arthur died. When the storm quieted, Leo looked at me with a softness that made me forget the decades between us. "You know," he said, "you have the kindest eyes I've ever seen." I didn't know what to say. Compliments at my age feel like gifts you're not supposed to accept. But he meant it. I could tell. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about him. About the way he listened, the way he filled the silence of my home without taking anything from it. He never flirted, not in the obvious way. He just saw me, not as a widow, not as an old woman, but as a person who was still very much alive. But small towns see everything, and they talk. When I started walking with Leo in the mornings, people stared. The woman at the bakery smiled too tightly. The mailman stopped making small talk. I told myself it didn't matter, that what we had was an innocent friendship. But my heart, oh my heart, knew better. I was falling quietly, hopelessly, dangerously. I should have stopped it then. I should have built a wall between us. But when life hands you a second chance at joy, even one that doesn't fit the rules, it's almost impossible to turn away. It happened slowly, like sunlight creeping across a dusty floor after a long night. I didn't realize how deeply Leo had settled into my life until one afternoon in late October. The air smelled of rain and burning leaves, and I was in the kitchen baking an apple pie, something I hadn't done in years. He knocked, holding a small bundle of cinnamon sticks. "Thought you might need the good kind," he said with that half smile that could thaw any chill. He stayed while the pie baked, sitting at the counter, telling me about his first failed attempt at baking as a teenager. How he'd confused salt with sugar and made his mother laugh so hard she cried. I laughed too, the kind of laughter that steals your breath and leaves you lighter. When the pie came out golden and steaming, we ate it right from the tin. 2 spoons clinking, sharing something that felt so simple, so ordinary, and yet so precious, I almost wanted to cry. That's when I started to notice how his presence changed me. My mornings were brighter. I hummed again while making coffee. I even started wearing lipstick, a soft rose, nothing too bold, but enough to remind myself that I was still here, still a woman. One evening I found him sitting on my porch steps with his guitar. The sky was burning orange, the kind of sunset that makes the world look like it's on fire, but calm at the same time. "Play me something," I said. He hesitated, then began a slow, gentle melody. His voice was soft, low, like he was singing to the dusk itself. But halfway through he looked at me. "This song reminds me of you," he said quietly. "It's about someone who forgot how to dance until one day she remembered she still could." I tried to laugh it off, but my throat was tight. "That's a beautiful thought," I whispered. He smiled. "It's more than a thought." After that night something shifted. The air between us changed, not heavy, not inappropriate, but charged with something neither of us dared to name. When he left, his fingers brushed mine at the door, and for the briefest second the world stopped spinning. Days turned into weeks, and the unspoken bond between us grew stronger, but so did the whispers. People noticed how often his truck was parked outside my house. I caught glimpses of curtains moving when we passed by. The world had decided to give our friendship a name neither of us had spoken aloud. One morning at the farmer's market, an old acquaintance of mine, a woman named Mabel, who never missed a chance to pry, smiled with that venomous sweetness small towns are famous for. "Eleanor, dear," she said, "isn't it lovely that you've taken young Leo under your wing? Must be refreshing, keeping up with the youth." Her voice dripped with implication. I forced a polite smile, but inside, shame and anger tangled like barbed wire. That night, I avoided Leo's calls. I told myself it was for his own good. I didn't want to ruin his reputation or become the subject of gossip. But when he showed up at my door, concern in his eyes, all my resolve crumbled. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, Leo, it's just people talk." He stepped closer. "Let them. You care too much about people who don't care about you." I wanted to argue, but his words hit too close to home. He took my hand gently, his thumb brushing the back of it. "You've spent your whole life being what everyone needed you to be," he said. "When do you get to just be you?" It was like a door inside me opened, a door I didn't even know was still locked. I cried then without warning, not soft tears but deep shaking ones, the kind that come from years of held rain. Leo didn't say a word, he just pulled me into his arms and held me. I could feel his heartbeat, steady and warm, anchoring me in a way that made me both terrified and safe all at once. When I finally looked up at him, the world around us blurred, the ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint whistle of the wind. All I could see was the honesty in his eyes. No judgment, no hesitation, just truth. That night after he left, I sat by the window long after midnight staring at the stars. My reflection in the glass looked older, yes, but softer. There was a light in my eyes again. I knew the town would never understand. I knew my daughter might never forgive me if she found out. But I also knew something else. For the first time in years, I felt alive. And when life hands you a moment like that, a spark in the dark. You either reach for it, or you spend the rest of your days wondering what might have been. So I reached. The first time we kissed, it wasn't planned. It wasn't anything that could have been rehearsed or justified. It just happened, like a truth that couldn't stay buried any longer. It was late November, and the world was quiet beneath a thin veil of frost. Leo had stopped by to bring firewood, his breath visible in the cold air, his jacket dusted with snowflakes. I had just finished decorating the small Christmas tree by the window, the same one Arthur and I had used for 20 years. It was my ritual of remembrance, a way to keep my past alive. But that night, for the first time, it didn't feel comforting. It felt heavy. Leo walked in, stamping the snow from his boots. "Looks beautiful," he said softly, his eyes lingering on the tree before turning to me. "But you look sad." I smiled faintly. "Just memories." He nodded. "Memories can be kind, but sometimes they're cages." I didn't know how to answer. He stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from my face. His touch was light but electric. "Eleanor," he whispered, "you don't have to live inside yesterday." His words melted something inside me I didn't even know was frozen. And then, without another word, his lips were on mine, warm, tentative, trembling with both fear and need. The world fell away. No years, no rules, no judgment. Just two people clinging to a moment they both needed more than air. When we pulled apart, I expected guilt. But what I felt instead was peace. "Leo," I murmured, "this can't happen." He nodded slowly. "I know, but it did." For days after, I tried to pretend nothing had changed, but everything had. My skin remembered his touch, my heart beat differently, and even my reflection in the mirror seemed to belong to a woman rediscovering herself. I had spent so many years trying to erase the ache of loss that I'd forgotten what it meant to feel alive. But life in small towns has a cruel way of punishing joy. The whispers grew louder. I heard them at the grocery store, at church, even during my morning walks. "Poor thing," someone murmured once. "She's lost her mind chasing youth." I pretended not to hear, but the words cut deep. I began to wonder if maybe they were right. One Sunday afternoon, my daughter Clara called. Her tone was clipped, cautious. "Mom, I've been hearing things," she said. "About you and the neighbor, boy." I froze. "He's not a boy, Clara. He's a friend." "A friend half your age," she shot back. "Mom, what are you thinking? People are talking. It's embarrassing." That word, embarrassing, hit harder than I expected. "Clara," I said quietly, "I've lived my life for everyone else. Your father, you, this town. Don't I get to have something for myself?" "You're 70, Mom. You're supposed to know better." "I'm 65, I corrected automatically, "and what I'm supposed to do stopped mattering the day your father died." The call ended with a silence that felt colder than any winter night. I sat by the window again, staring out at Leo's house. The lights were on. He was there. Part of me wanted to run to him. The other part wanted to disappear. But when he knocked minutes later, as if he had felt my ache across the yard, I didn't turn him away. He walked in quietly, his eyes searching mine. "Your daughter called me," he said. My heart sank. "She asked me to stay away from you." "And what did you say?" I whispered. He hesitated, then stepped closer. "I told her I couldn't promise that." He reached for my hand and something in me broke open again. "Jake, this is wrong," I said, tears burning my throat. He shook his head. "No, Eleanor, loving someone isn't wrong. Letting fear decide your life is." We stood there for a long time, the quiet between us filled with everything we couldn't say. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that love could exist outside judgment, that hearts didn't have expiration dates. But I'd lived long enough to know that life wasn't a fairy tale. Still, as he pulled me close, and I felt his heartbeat steady against mine, I knew something with absolute certainty. This love, however fleeting, was real. It was pure. It was mine. The days that followed were stolen ones. Secret walks at dusk, shared coffee on the porch before sunrise, laughter that belonged only to us. We became two souls suspended between worlds, one ruled by fear, the other by truth. I knew it couldn't last forever, but for the first time since Arthur's death, I didn't care about forever. I cared about now, and sometimes now is enough. Winter in Havenwood was always quiet, but that year the silence had a different weight. Every snowflake that fell seemed to land between Leo and me like a warning, reminding us that what we had could not stay hidden forever. Yet, the harder the world tried to pull us apart, the closer we became. There was something sacred about the stolen moments, the way he'd reach for my hand in the dark, or how we'd share tea on my porch, our breaths forming tiny clouds in the cold air. But secrets have a way of finding the light, no matter how carefully you guard them. It was mid-December when the truth finally slipped through the cracks. I was at the grocery store buying flour for a pie when Mabel, the same woman whose words had stung weeks before, approached me with that same sugary sweet smile. "Eleanor," she said, lowering her voice to a whisper, "I saw you two at Miller's diner last night, such devotion." Her tone was dripping with mockery. The world stopped around me, my hands trembled. "Mabel," I managed to say, "I don't owe you an explanation." "Oh, I don't need one," she replied, "but you should think of what people might say about a teacher, widowed or not, keeping company with a man young enough to be her son." Her words followed me all the way home. By the time I stepped through my door, I could barely breathe. Leo was there, sitting by the fireplace, his guitar resting on his knee. He looked up, concern shadowing his face. "What happened?" I dropped my purse, my voice shaking. "They know, Leo, everyone knows." He stood, his expression unreadable. "Then let them know," he said. "You don't understand," I snapped, tears spilling before I could stop them. "This town doesn't forgive. It doesn't forget. They'll destroy you for being with me." Jake's jaw tightened. "Then maybe your world is too small." The words cut deep, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. For years, I had built my life inside the expectations of others so carefully that I'd forgotten how to breathe outside them. And now, when someone offered me air, I was too afraid to take it. I turned away, whispering, "You should go, Leo." He hesitated for a long time. I could feel him behind me, could almost hear the sound of his heart breaking in the quiet. Finally, he said, "If that's what you want." "It's what's right," I said, though every part of me screamed that it wasn't. When the door closed, the silence was unbearable. The walls that had once felt safe now pressed against me like a prison. That night, I walked through every room of my house, touching the things that had once defined my life. The framed photos, the books, the letters from Arthur, and for the first time, they felt like ghosts. Days passed. Christmas came and went. I went through the motions, smiling for Clara when she called, pretending everything was fine. But the world felt dimmer. Music didn't sound the same. Even the birds outside my window seemed quieter. Then one night, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find a small box on the porch. Inside was a note written in Leo's familiar handwriting. "I'm leaving town tomorrow. Dad's better and it's time for me to move on. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. You reminded me that love isn't measured in years. It's measured in truth. Don't let the world convince you you've lived your whole story. There's still more waiting for you, Eleanor." Beneath the note was a small, hand-carved wooden heart. I sat down on the porch, clutching it, and cried until the stars blurred. I thought of running after him, of telling him to stay, but something held me back. The same fear that had ruled my life for too long. Winter turned to spring. I went back to my routines, gardening, volunteering at the library, walking through town with polite smiles. People had stopped whispering, but I knew what they thought. They believed it had been a foolish fling, a lapse of judgment, something I would eventually forget. But I hadn't forgotten. Every time I passed the Hayes' house and saw the empty porch, I felt the ache return. I missed him. Not just his voice or his touch, but the way he saw me. He had looked past my wrinkles, my grief, my years, and had found something worth loving. And once you've been seen like that, you can never go back to invisibility. Then one morning in late April, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just my name. Inside was a photo taken by someone else, maybe from across the street. It was Leo and me laughing, our heads tilted together, unaware of the camera. On the back, written in his handwriting, were 4 words. "You were my home." I pressed the photo to my heart and whispered, "You were mine too." That day, I decided something. Maybe I couldn't change what the town thought. Maybe I couldn't rewrite the years that had passed, but I could still choose how the rest of my story would be written. And for the first time, I wanted to write it for me. The following months changed me in quiet, unnoticeable ways. The woman who had once hidden behind lace curtains and polite smiles began to fade, replaced by someone braver, softer, and more honest. I started teaching again, just 2 literature classes a week at the community center. I told myself it was to keep busy, but deep down I think I wanted to feel connected again. My students were a mix of retirees, single parents, and dreamers trying to find a second chance at something just like me. We read books about courage and regret, about love that arrived too late or never left at all. I could see pieces of myself in every story, and when I spoke about them, I wasn't lecturing anymore. I was living them. One evening after class, I walked past the old diner, the same one Leo and I had been seen at. Through the window, the same booth was empty, but the jukebox was playing softly, that same melody he used to hum. I stopped for a moment, listening. The ache was still there, but it wasn't hollow anymore. It was warm, like an echo of something beautiful that had once been mine. People in town had stopped whispering, at least to my face. I'd become invisible again. But this time, it didn't hurt, because now I knew something they didn't. I had lived a love that was real. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And once you've known real love, you carry it with you forever. Then one afternoon in June, I received a letter from Nashville. It was from Leo. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Eleanor," it began, "I've been playing music again. You always told me to use my words, so I did. There's a song that came out of us. It's called Havenwood. They're playing it on the radio here. People think it's about a town. It's not. It's about you. I don't expect you to write back. I just wanted you to know that the love you gave me didn't end. It grew. It became something bigger than both of us." I held the letter to my chest and laughed through my tears. He'd found his way, just as I hoped he would. That night I turned on the radio and by some miracle, I found the song. His voice came through the speakers, soft, honest, trembling in places like he was still finding the right words. "She lived at the edge of the maples where the world forgot to look twice. She taught me that time doesn't matter when love still burns bright in your eyes." I closed my eyes, letting the melody fill every corner of my quiet house. It wasn't sadness I felt. It was gratitude, because no matter what the world thought, what we had was pure. It wasn't about age or appearances. It was about recognition, about 2 souls who met exactly when they needed each other most. From that day on, I changed the rhythm of my life. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. I spent more mornings by the lake, writing letters to people I loved but had lost touch with. I smiled at strangers. I even accepted an invitation from a widower at church for coffee, not because I was looking for love, but because I was open to living, and every now and then, when I walked down Havenwood Lane and saw the oak trees swaying above, I'd whisper, "You were right, Leo. The world is bigger than I thought." That summer, I decided to sell the house. It wasn't out of sorrow. It was because I was ready to move forward. I wanted a place where the walls didn't carry echoes, where every creak of the floorboards didn't sound like memory. When the papers were signed and the last box was sealed, I took one final walk through the garden. The roses were blooming, the same ones Leo once said he'd learned patience from. As I stood there, the wind brushed against my face, and for a moment I could almost hear his laugh, the way it used to fill the air between us like sunlight. I smiled. Not every love story is meant to last forever. Some exist to wake us up, to show us who we still are beneath all the years, fears, and expectations. Leo had done that for me. He had reminded me that the heart doesn't age. It only forgets how to hope, and he had helped me remember. I left Havenwood that afternoon without looking back. My car rolled down the hill, the trees thinning behind me, and as I reached the open road, I whispered a quiet goodbye to the woman I used to be. She had been brave in her own way, surviving grief and loneliness. But the woman driving away, she was alive again. I moved to a small lakeside town in northern Vermont, a place where no one knew my name, where the air smelled of pine and fresh beginnings. My new home was modest, a white cottage with blue shutters and a porch that overlooked the water. There was no history in the walls, no lingering echoes of judgment, only peace. The first few weeks were quiet, and I liked it that way. I woke with the sunrise, brewed my coffee, and sat outside wrapped in a blanket, listening to the lake lap gently against the shore. Sometimes I read, sometimes I painted, but mostly I just watched. There's something healing about stillness. It teaches you that peace isn't the absence of noise, it's the absence of need. One morning as I was tending to a small patch of garden I'd planted, My neighbor, an older man named Harold, called over the fence. "You must be the new lady by the lake," he said. "Those roses of yours look promising." I smiled, remembering Leo's words all that time ago. "Then I guess I'll learn patience." We talked for a while about the weather, fishing, books. There was no spark, no hidden tension, just easy companionship. And yet, as we spoke, I realized something. I was no longer afraid of connection. The fear that once ruled my life, the fear of being seen, judged, misunderstood, had lost its hold on me. That evening I went for a walk by the lake. The air was cool. The sky was painted in streaks of pink and lavender. I stopped at a small wooden pier, took off my shoes, and dipped my feet into the water. It was cold enough to make me laugh, a real, full laugh that startled even me. For the first time in so many years, I wasn't thinking about who I used to be or what others expected. I was simply there. When I returned home, I turned on the radio. Static at first, then music. A familiar voice came through. Leo's. His song Havenwood was playing again, but this time it didn't make me cry. It made me smile. She found her freedom in the stillness where no one knew her name. She learned that love doesn't vanish. It just changes shape again. I sat by the window, the moonlight spilling across the floor, and whispered, "You kept your promise, Leo," because in a way he had. He'd taught me that love doesn't always have to stay to matter. Some loves are meant to pass through our lives like seasons, brief but transformative. They arrive to break the ice around our hearts, and once they do, they leave us blooming. In the months that followed, I began writing again. At first, just small journal entries, little reflections about life, aging, and love. But slowly, they grew into full pages, memories shaped into stories. One of them I titled, "He was half my age, but he saw the whole of me." I didn't write it for publication. I wrote it to remember, to make peace with the past, and to leave something behind for Clara. I knew she'd read it one day and finally understand that love isn't something to be measured or judged. It's simply something to be felt. And maybe, just maybe, she'd forgive me for choosing to live instead of merely survive.